Hey guys, it's Sam here. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm in Pumping Iron Gym, but it is another rest day. So with these few days that I'm taking off, I'm getting on really well. There's not really much update from the last video on how I'm getting on, but it'll be tomorrow or the day after that I'll be back training. But I just wanted to be in the gym today because I can't get away from it. It'd be a nice place to get a bit of work done, a bit more of a different scene for making the video. And today's video I thought would be a good opportunity to explain something more directly useful to you guys, because I've explained how to plan the numbers for a bulking diet, and I've explained a lot of my sort of theoretical ideas about diets and the numbers, but I thought I would apply that today to explaining how to set up a cutting diet on a low carb kind of plan. This is what I found most effective, and I think it would be good to take a few examples and a few guidelines that I use myself and when helping people, so that if you're not working with a coach and you wanted to get started now, you'd have the numbers or something to work with, know about some of the resources to go to, some of the ideas behind how I would do it. And I think now is quite good timing actually, as we're getting just into the spring. We're now just into March, you know, the 7th. I think anyone that was wanting to get all shredded and everything for the summer would be best to get started now. So if you've never done a cut down before and never tracked it yourself, I'm going to explain a bit about setting it up, but also how to monitor progress like week on week, and how to adjust what kinds of indicators you'd be looking for in your self check-ins if you're doing this yourself, and what you would do to adjust to keep it moving at the same rate to take you down, and what the goals might be in terms of measurements for the kind of look you're trying to achieve in a certain time frame. So the first thing that I would do is make sure that I'm eating as much as possible. It may seem counterintuitive when getting started on a diet and wanting to lose body fat, but eating less food is a card that you may want to play later on, and it is one of the options in the toolbox. But once you've played the card of eating less, you can't come back from that. You can't do it again. So it's when things really stall that you want the option to be able to take out more food, but still without going hungry. I do maintain that you can do this without going over hungry. So when you start, you want to be on as much as possible and be losing weight while eating as much as possible. So a good way of doing this, you know, in my other videos I've explained my reservations about calories in, calories out, and the calorie paradigm in general, but just to make sure as a check that we're not eating too little, I do use calories as a way to check this, and I basically make sure that at the start of the diet I'm in a theoretical surplus, even though I don't believe that that's what dictates weight loss and gain. I do believe that we need energy from food, and I do calculate for a theoretical surplus at the start of any kind of cutting down program. So to recap on all of that, because we covered that in the calculating bulking diet video from the shoulders day that I did here the other week, you basically take your basal metabolic rate, which requires you to know your age, height and weight. You can find a calculator online. So, you know, when you do all of this, you probably want to be sat with a computer in front of you. So you'd be sat there with your computer, you'd you know, Google calculate basal metabolic rate, you'd put in your details, whether those figures were in metric or imperial. You can calculate those in another tab as well. So as you've got the computer to hand, it'll do it all for you. So basal metabolic rate, and then look for maintenance calories. You know, search for the formula for maintenance calories on activity multiplier. That's the turn of phrase that you're going to want to use to find the multiplier for figuring out what your maintenance would be, because that's the basal metabolic rate, which is the energy that your body would require before you start factoring in for actually getting out of bed and doing anything. This activity multiplier will say like sedentary, light exercise, moderate exercise, heavy exercise, extremely heavy exercise. That'll be the list, and then it'll be the multiplier will be 1 point something, 1.1, 1.2, 1.4, whatever, you know, that's 1 point whatever times your basal metabolic rate. So you work out your basal metabolic rate first from your height, weight and age, then get the activity multiplier and read through the details for each of the categories and see which one best applies for you, because it'll be based on how much you're training and how active your job and your lifestyle are overall. And then do that multiplier, and that'll give you an amount in calories that you're going to work to. I suggest that you start a diet, a plan for a diet that's several hundred calories above that, even though we're cutting down, but what you're going to tightly control is the carbohydrates. Now there's different versions of doing the low carb diet depending on how fast you want it to work, how effective you want it to be, how restrictive you're prepared to allow it to be, and kind of food choices like that. So people categorize it differently, you know, in a very, very, very low carbohydrate diet like Atkins or keto or something, you know, you'd be looking at under 20 or 15 grams of carbohydrate for the whole day across the board, possibly less. You know, that as an upper maximum, maybe 15 or 20 grams. According to a doctor, you know, the more broad kind of categorization of what they'd call a low carb diet would be more like under 100 grams, possibly 150. I'm going to say for it to be really a low carb diet and to be effective, you know, 150 would be the absolute maximum, but that would be a maximum, excuse me, allowable if you're, you know, not too heavy in body fat already and not too metabolically challenged by, you know, lifestyle factors leading to more and more weight gain and everything. So that would be the starting point if you're okay in that regard, that it could be 100 to 150 grams. Now, if you're going to do that version, have all of the 100 grams either before or after the workout in the meal plan that you're going to calculate, and they should be not sugars but from starch. So starch carbohydrates are the ones where it's just bound together glucose, you know, but not the sucrose, the fructose and all the rest of it. That carbohydrates tend to come in a blend. If it's a piece of fruit, it's going to be a little bit of each of the ones that end in O's, so single sugars and double sugars, monosaccharides and disaccharides respectively. Same applies to lots of vegetables as well, although they're much higher water content. But what you're going to do if you're doing the version where it's 100 to 150 grams is just pick the starch one. If you don't know what those are and you really want to learn about nutrition, you can get hold of a book I've reviewed or talked about quite a lot, The Composition of Foods by McCanson Widdowson. That is the most authoritative book of food tables and food data. It's what all the dietitians and nutritionists use when they get their qualifications. So that would be a really good desktop guide if you're really serious about learning this. Otherwise, you've got the USDA food tables, which is a table that you could also, you know, get up on your computer, download the spreadsheet of it online, and that would all be for free. Otherwise, you can get all of your information also on the computer in a pretty accurate way if you pull up the nutrition labels for the actual products that you're going to use, and those are usually published on the supermarket websites that you're using. So that would be ones that are specific to the products and foods that you're buying and where you're buying them, rather than a general average which tends to be programmed into all of these apps and other things. So that would be another good source of the actual data, you know, if you're trying to pull out which is the carbohydrate food that's got the starch versus what's got the fructose, galactose, lactose, all the rest of it. But if you just want the summary, I'll tell you now. Basically, the starch ones are all the different types of rice, all the different types of bread, and all the different types of kind of potatoes or very similar root vegetables. Those are like your starch foods, and with bodybuilding it's usually the rice that goes down the best, because it doesn't create resistant starch when it's cooked or have the husk on it if you've gone for white rice, which I recommend. So, you know, if you just want to be told what to do, which one to pick, go with white rice. If you know that you can tolerate it and you're good with it every single day, because this is a day meal plan, then by all means go with sweet potato, or even whole grain bread, possibly. So that's the short version. So then you're going to make this plan, and because carbohydrate is limited on this version of the plan at 100 grams to 150 grams, you're going to put that in first. Obviously, it's going to be roughly 4 times whatever the number of grams of carbohydrate were, as it's 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. But that's not going to be the entire calories of it, because some of these foods also contain an amount of protein. You know, even rice contains some protein. Usually they're not fat. Usually, very broadly speaking, with different food groups, the plant foods are a combination of fat and carbohydrate, and the animal foods are a combination of excuse me, I got that wrong. The plant foods are a combination of carbohydrate and protein, And the animal foods like meats and animal produce are a combination of fat and protein. And the only real food groups that are an exception to this are nuts and seeds, which contain a bit of all three of the so-called macronutrients. And that's how it sits. So there is going to be an amount of protein in these starch foods that you're using as a carbohydrate source. So you've got to figure out the calories separately. But basically, you're going to plan for either 100 or 150 grams of carbohydrate from starch, which you're going to put in, but take the data for that food as a whole to figure out what the calorie total of it is, and it's going to be whatever your calorie daily allowance was on this surplus that you're planning. Remember, we're doing that, so we've still got the card to play of pulling out food when things get harder and slows down later. And then you'll have a remaining amount. So, say it came to, 400 calories, and the plan for this surplus was going to be 3,000. You've got 2,600 left to come from protein and fat. So then you're going to do the same for protein and fat. With the protein, you're going to make sure that as a minimum, it's a gram of protein per pound of body weight if you are very, very sensible and not doing anything like crazy with your bodybuilding. If you're doing all sorts of crazy things with your bodybuilding, probably you can uptake more protein. This has been proven by a lot of people's experience. Hopefully you know what I mean by that. If it's that, maybe it's going to be 400 grams, 450 grams of protein perhaps. And then the remainder is fat. And the way that you're going to jiggle this around to meet that calorie total while having that carbohydrate maximum, that protein minimum, and the rest fat, is basically by playing with how lean the meats are that are going to fit in versus how fatty. So on the fattier end, on the beef and stuff, you've got chuck, brisket, ribeye. On the leaner end, you've got silver side, top side. In the middle, you've got kind of like sirloin, but that's still on the leaner end of things. You'll just have to play around with it and look at the numbers to make it fit. Obviously, this is quicker the more you do it, but the first time it might take you a while. But I promise it'll be worth it. For all the time you're putting in the gym, the time put in here is going to lead to more results later and later on. It's definitely not time wasted. Another way of manipulating the ratio of fats and protein, so you've got that protein minimum and the fat make up the rest of the allowance for the day, is just determining how many egg yolks you're going to have versus how many whites, because they're very easy to separate. You can crack an egg and with a spoon just press up against inside the shell to stop the yolk falling out and just pour the white out and chuck the yolk. Or you can do it the other way around and just spoon the yolk out and chuck the white. Or you can get liquid egg whites, and so for your allowance of whole eggs, you just crack the whole egg into your container to make scrambled egg or whatever. Say that was 4, get 4 egg whites. If you wanted to take the total, you wanted the total to be 8, you'd need 4 more. You need whatever measure that is on the jug of liquid egg white stuff to top that up with. And that's how you manipulate fat versus protein, just by messing around with egg whites and egg yolks. Very, very easy. I will demonstrate it in the kitchen another day, but you're going to do these various things. Or, if you prefer fish, I'll give you a bit of advice while we're talking about it. The fish, the fattiest stuff would be like anchovies, mackerel, almost as fatty as that would be. Well, on the fattier end of the scale would be stuff like salmon. Getting a bit leaner, sea bream, sea bass, leanest of all, like tuna, tilapia, general cod, haddock, miscellaneous whitefish, pretty much pure protein except for the water content, and that's the continuum of fat and protein with the fish. But once you start learning about nutrition and open the books, you'll get a hang of this and remember it. And as I say, the easiest way to manipulate it is egg yolk and egg whites. So that's what you're going to do to the total. Say it was 3,000 calories. That would be a decent sized person, but not enormous. Like, to start a cutting plan like this, you could have, like you would have had that 100 grams of carbohydrate. That would be like 400 calories, but there'll be a bit of protein as well. Call it 460. So I've got 2,540 calories to make with protein and fat. The 200 is going to be getting on for, it's going to be over 800 calories, the rest. So somewhere in this you're going to have like possibly 1,000 calories coming from fat. But once you start working it out, you'll figure this out. And then you baseline it. Baseline it so that the meals are going to be that the leaner protein is the one that you have after your workout, and that's the one that's going to go with the carbohydrates, say from the white rice. And then the other 2 or 3 meals are the fat and protein combination, and they're going to be breakfast, possibly meal 2. Say meal 3 was the post-workout one in the setup that I just described, and then meal 4 would be a fats and protein one again. And that's your setup, and you're going to eat the same every day because now it's baselined and you need to track the results, measure in a week. Now I suggest with measuring it, you get the skinfold calipers out and the tape measure out, because look, this is not Weight Watchers, this is changing your body, so we need some kind of like eyes-on body composition, and we can't afford to be having like scans for body composition like every week. It's just cost prohibitive for most people and take too much time. So best estimate with calipers and tape measure to make sure we're not losing too much muscle. We want, chest measurement, arm measurement to maintain as far as possible, although they may, depending on how fat you are, there may be quite a bit of fat on your back as well, which is going to come off on the tape measurement. But you're going to get a feel for this after doing it for a while. And then if it's not working, really you want to be seeing at least 0.5 millimeter come off some of the skinfold caliper measurements on the weekly. So you're going to do that. And if it is about that much and you're losing 2 or 3 pounds, possibly more a week, you maybe don't need to change the plan. You can just run it for the second week. If nothing's coming off, then, maybe, unfortunately, you weren't in a position to make this work with 100 to 150 grams of carbohydrate. You want to pull that completely. Won't take me too long to describe the alternative ways of doing this, because if you are doing it a different way, same rules apply that I've described in terms of like starting with this calorie surplus thing, but you're not going to use the carbohydrate amount at all. You're not going to have an allowance of 100 or 150 grams to start with. It's just going to be nothing, or the trace carbohydrates from just having, say, berries. Let's say plant food that's highly nutritious that you might want to include, that you don't really have to count for because it's very hard for it to come over 20 grams a day, would basically be leaves, stems and berries. So, like rocket, lettuce, asparagus, the stem, and, blueberries, for example. Asparagus in particular will help you lose a bit of water weight. It's a natural diuretic, some of the compounds that are in that food. So I often just add that in the plan like quite early on to like get the water weight off quickly and get more of a clear idea of seeing what's going on. So even if you're going to do like the zero carb version, chuck out the starches, can include the leaves, the berries and the stems, probably don't need to count it, and then do the same with the rest with the numbers on the fat and the protein, like for those animal foods. It's pretty close to carnivore. Or you can chuck those entirely and do it completely carnivore, but still, figure it out with the protein and the fat in the way that I've described up to the total that's going to be a surplus. Baseline it and then track it in the same fashion. Maybe you can eat more. I would say basically if you're hungry, you need to eat more, and see if you can make it work eating even more. Because if you're going hungry early on in the diet, the whole thing will grind to a halt, because no one can maintain being over hungry for too long. Okay, and it's not pleasant, and it's not necessary. So the rules are basically, if it's working, you're hungry, you re-baseline it, eating more. If it's not working as fast as it needs to be, going by the skinfold measurements and the weight coming off, then you need to reduce carbohydrate again, or reduce fat and increase protein, re-baseline and try again. And that's basically how I recommend you do it. In terms of the measurements you're shooting for, I learned one of the best pieces of bodybuilding information I learned was from the book Body Opus by Dan Duchaine. You may know of Dan Duchaine because he pioneered some of the things that are very common in bodybuilding now. I do believe that he pioneered aromatase inhibitors and beta-2 agonists. I may be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure he pioneered these things. And he was, of course, the author of the Underground Steroid Handbook, which was one of the very first books that gave the real practical lowdown on how bodybuilders were doing this with enhancement. So that's a classic. But his other book is called Body Opus, and in that he describes what elite conditioning is. And he said that if you can't get a skin fold of more than 4 millimeters of skin-folded body fat, subcutaneous body fat of any more than 4 millimeters anywhere over your body, that's elite conditioning. So every time I've competed, I've gone for that 4 millimeters, like anywhere, and got to it and had the best condition in my class and been very, very happy with it. In terms of different goals that aren't quite that extreme, I'd say that 5 millimeters is a maximum skin fold anywhere on your body. Is extremely ripped, very, very shredded. 6 millimeters, that's ripped. That's like you could go to the beach and have the best physique there, and that's not that hard to achieve, and it's actually perfectly simple to maintain. So say when you first do all of your measurements, like on the abs, on the legs, on the glutes, on the hamstrings, on the lower back, like with the skin fold, say you're writing all of that down, and the first week that you're baselining this diet and you do it, that's coming in at say 11 millimeters. As you lose up to a millimeter a week on certain sites, those early weeks you're not going to see any difference like in the mirror. But trust me, if that's how much you're losing like per week, you are well on the right track, because if you just keep that up and you get down to 6, you're going to look fucking excellent. If you get lower than that, you're going to look elite, like granite, by the time you get to 4 millimeters. So, you know, if 11's coming down to 10, just stick with the method, and that's what you do, and that's how you diet and track to get shredded. So I hope that's useful. I will take any comments on this or any questions, just pop them below. If you like this kind of information and advice, make sure you subscribe, because I'm giving it out on the daily, not keeping anything secret, and day by day I'm going to cover everything that I know is relevant in bodybuilding. So if you like all of this kind of stuff, you should definitely consider that. And that's basically today's lesson. So I'm glad to have that in the bank, because it's early spring and people will need that and need to know about it now if they intend to use the coming weeks productively towards summer. And hey, look, if you pick this up now and work with it, show me what you look like by summer. I'll be very excited to see. Now, all that's the practical side of it. For a more theoretical discussion of this low-carb theory stuff and the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis, I'll have to return to it and unpack it in more detail another day. But I'm hoping that's a good practical guide. The other main thing that I've been considering looking over these last couple of rest days, as you know, is the Arnold Classic. And I was wondering who's going to be making it to the UK one after the latest stuff that come out. But I've just seen a couple of hours ago that Samson is in for the UK, so that's who I'll be supporting when I go along. I'll be really good to see, but it's not entirely clear exactly who else will be there. But it won't be the only show that I'll go to this year. There's all of the amateur stuff like PCA and Two Bros here in the UK. I'm going to make sure to get to loads of those, because I've either got guys I'm looking after doing those contests in some cases, and friends competing, which I like to turn out for. So one way or another there will be contest coverage of the UK kind of amateur stuff, shows that I have more direct involvement with at this stage. That'll all be coming up. I want to keep variety and days out in the mix of the videos, because otherwise I'm either in the gym or sat in a chair somewhere, either, you know, showing a practical or explaining a theory. But I want to include the lifestyle bit, which would include a few shows and expos and events and all that kind of thing. So we'll be taking the channel on the road, and that will be starting with the UK Arnold's, then the Sam Select meet and greet the following Tuesday I'm booked in for. That's at Muscleworks Orpington, so that's going to be the week after next, so that one to look forward to as well. And the gym tours, I know it's workout still, but the gym tours series I'm going to take out of London a little bit more often in the coming months. I've got some places left in London on my list to cover and show off, but like the Peterborough trip, going to Definition, there'll be more trips to other cities that I know to have good gyms. So there is another one I want to cover in Peterborough. There's Bodyworks Peterborough that I actually used to train at for a couple of years, so I know it's really good. Been told how it's improved a lot recently since I've ever last gone, so that'll be the next Peterborough one, I would imagine. And there's another one in Corby when I visit family. I covered the chapel. That was really good. That was the first gym tour that I did. If you haven't seen that in the playlist, Great little gym, a converted chapel, but seriously well equipped. Well, the other gym in Corby that I would take a look at is the Cave. I've been there as well, so that's another one that'll be a trip out of London fairly soon, I would expect. Keep that playlist going. And I'm expecting, if I feel good with it, I feel like I don't need to just take any more extra rest here. I feel like I can be back in the gym somewhere tomorrow. So it could be here pumping iron, could be Bodyworks Tottenham, or it could be my local down at Zone. But there'll always be a video. Don't worry about that. So hopefully you've enjoyed this one. As I say, if anything's not clear, just ask me. I'm on the comments every day as well as getting a video out every day, and I look forward to speaking to you all soon. Cheers.